Hey, what's going on, everybody? A little late to the party with this particular review, but basically because I didn't get around to watching the movie until just the last couple days. So, given Halloween had been just recently, and I decided to, while I was both at work and just, doing stuff around the house, decided to listen to some Stephen King audiobooks. Salem's Lot being, one of my favorite of his. I'm not, a massive Stephen King fan overall, but Salem's Lot's really good. I always really had a really good time listening to that story. It's kind of a modern version of Dracula in a way, with some of Stephen King's own sensibilities and approach to narration and depictions of characters and so forth. So I always like that, even though the two-parter that they came out with was kind of a piece of crap. It doesn't really hold up very well at all. Then I was listening to a little bit of Pet Sematary, and then I decided to revisit it. That being It, the more well-known of his longer-winded books. And yeah, so in that, which also had a two-part miniseries that was okay, It definitely has some shortcomings and is a bit dated, especially the final, creature design that Pennywise we see it was revealed as. It's kind of like spider alien form. If you watch the 1990 miniseries, it's pretty pretty laughably outdated and and not scary really at all. I mean, I remember seeing bits and pieces of it when it aired as a kid. It was pretty terrifying at the time because I was only like 9 years old or something like that, around that age. So yeah, but now it's kind of cheesy. But Tim Curry's performance as Pennywise still holds up. It's he does the character justice for how much time was allotted to actually try and tell the story. Because you remember, in the book he's appears from time to time, but he's more in the background as kind of the ever present force of evil and source of fear for all of the young kids in the town of Derry. So I decided I'll give the new film a shot, the one that just came out this past September. And which I should note before I get into the review that it is part one, essentially, of a two-part series. Chapter one, if you will, I think is what it's kind of its. I don't know if it's a alternate title. Is It Chapter One. They are coming out with part two in 2019. So basically, from what I understand, they decided to just film the first film is just the complete story of just what happens to the kids. That one summer, and then come back and revisit it with the second film as the adult part, instead of how it is in the book, where they bounce back between the two different periods in time, from the present and the present time I think it's in the 1980s, back to 1957, 58, back when all the kids were kids and had met up for the first time, as a group of seven, for the Losers Club and the Lucky Seven, or whatever you want to call them, refer to them as, and had that whole, all those events unfold and then bounce back and forth. So which I think is a better way to approach it, because, like I said, it moves the present day story along, which obviously is the focal point, because that's where we're ultimately getting to. Plus, we're getting all the backstory fill in, building it up as well, so it works well in the narrative. But like I said, this one they just decided to just do straight up film the story is from the kids' perspective, or when they were kids, in 1988, 89. Is when they decided to put the film as its date instead of the late 1950s. And I think basically they did this, they tried to act like they wanted to update it, the sensibilities or whatever, but I think they wanted to really avoid all of the racial connotation and the connotations of, racism and the dropping N bombs and whatnot, because that was a big part of the the story for Mike Hanlon, who's the one black kid that's a member of the Losers Club, whose family and himself specifically are targets of racist characters in the story, and this, which is a shame because the story deals with racism and prejudice in in an intelligent way. It doesn't it doesn't make really make one-dimensional characters that are just kind of automaton evil, racist bigots. There's a reason behind why like Henry Bowers is the way he is. It's a kind of a the father that raises him turns him in kind of ingrains this mindset of bigotry against Mike Hanlon and his family and blacks in general. And in turn, his father, I can't remember, it was Charlie Bowers. I can't remember his first name off the top of my head, but he was in fought in World War II in the Pacific Theater against the Japanese, and I'm from wartime, war messes people up. So he came back, with a kind of messed up, maybe PTSD type of thing, and that kind of built into his own kind of descent into madness, and overwhelmed by anger and becoming an abusive father and things. So there was some intelligence involved there, which is why it's a shame that that series hasn't been done justice. But I won't get too much into that right at the moment. But maybe I'll talk about the possibility of how the book should be handled as a miniseries in a different video. But anyway, so they just, you don't have, even the miniseries in 1990 was they're dropping N-bombs in there, just, a few times to, emphasize the racism that was taking place. And remember, this is in the North, this isn't the South, this is in Maine, this isn't in, Alabama or Georgia or Mississippi or anything like that. This is taking place up in in Yankee Land, if you will. So yeah, that was one change they made. So we get that story basically taking place in the tail end of the 80s, which, like I said, I was born in 1981, so I would have been just a couple years younger than the characters in that particular story. So in a way I could kind of, it was kind of interesting because it would fit more with my generation, even though I didn't really pay too much attention to the cultural accuracies. There were a few cultural things like New Kids on the Block and whatnot, which I guess was kind of a side gag. But yeah, so that being said, the film itself was really, really crappy. I'll just, get to the point. That's, I could sum it up as that movie, the most recent adaptation of the book, is complete garbage. It's just a really bad, B movie, essentially, with, the exterior of what would make you think would be a blockbuster, a big budget Hollywood movie, even though by today's budgetary standards it was made relatively cheaply. I think the budget, not including advertising, of course, which always is a massive amount of money. I know if you see a film's budget, they say they made the film for $100 million. Well, they may have very well spent that amount or more on marketing campaigns, especially if they're marketing all over the world. So this film actually, I think, if I read correctly, is now the highest grossing horror film of all time. It was breaking $600+ million in the box office. And with an R rating, which, was if they didn't try to pull the PG-13 crap. And to be honest, they could actually, if given it was just a PG, they could have probably done a PG-13. They would have had to cut down on the language, but you can do stylistic violence and scares in a PG-13 and mess with the audience. There was no real ultra gore type stuff. Compared to some films like Saw and whatnot, but Yeah, I mean, just from the opening scene, where Georgie Denborough gets the his brother Bill, makes him the little paper sailboat, and and covers it with paraffin wax to keep it from the water from getting to it, and he goes in because there's a storm that's kind of flooded the over or backed up or kind of flooded the sewers, or the water drains. So there's a lot of water along the road. So George decides to sail his little boat down along the way. We're all pretty familiar with that from the if you've seen the previous miniseries or read the book, it opens the book right up with it. His little sailboat goes down the drain. He reaches down, and there, all of a sudden, Pennywise the clown appears in the drain, and talks to him and tries to befriend him. And the minute, first off, I didn't realize how much. I mean, I'd seen the design, the art, the makeup and mask and design, everything for the new Pennywise model before I'd watched it, but I didn't realize how much of it was. How it limited the facial expression of the actor, of Bill Skarsgård, compared to Tim Curry's character. And then Tim Curry had specifically, because I think he had done he definitely had done Legend, played Darkness in the Ridley Scott's lesser known kind of fairy tale movie Legend, which is one of my absolute all time favorite movies still to this day, just for a pure, fantastical escapism and wonder and whatnot. I love that movie. It's dark. It's an extremely dark movie too, even if it is it's basically a fairy tale. But I mean, he was in full prosthetics. He had to wear these scleroid lenses over his eyes. I mean, just tons and tons of makeup. Just crazy amount of time getting prepped to play this character. And when you have that happen, it limits what the actor has when they're making, expression is their face and the facial muscles and whatnot. So Tim Curry's clown mask appearance basically allowed him to make his facial gestures and everything much more visible, which he wanted. He insisted on it, probably because he also didn't want to go through the hell of makeup and prosthesis and facial masks and whatnot. So but this one, it's like almost like the mouth articulates a little bit, but other than that, it's like the face doesn't articulate at all. So you get basically like a mouth opening, jaw opening, and you got these big fat lips and teeth and stuff. So which isn't fine. But then, we hear Pennywise talk for the first time, and I'm like, what the fuck is this crap? I mean, it was like, it was just like I don't know who told Bill Skarsgård that was a good voice to do that was going to actually work for Pennywise, because I mean, it was just laughably bad. I was cringing at hearing him talking with the doing the interaction with Georgie Denborough's character, and I'm like, okay, so this kind of pretty much set the precedent and lowered the bar insanely low for for my expectations for the rest of the film, because it was just dumb. I mean, Curry basically kind of came across as almost reminded more of like, not kind of more like Binky the Clown, kind of like this, kind of more like you would, expect kind of like a big city kind of swagger, but with like kind of, mixed with like a hobo that rides the rails with kind of a sharp wit, but kind of a blue collar kind of, I don't know, kind of mindset. Just kind of more of a lot of, more charisma, and just more kind of, he gave the impression of a clown that would, you might actually see in the circus, or performing on the street or whatever, and anything, whereas the one in this one is definitely more of just kind of a bizarre fantasy character that would, So I mean, in that sense, I guess, if it doesn't really make a huge difference as far as conceptually, because it's it's this whatever appears to the children in their imagination, but it's just the voice acting and the facial design, and then the CG and everything, where the mouth opens up when he's going to bite off Georgie's arm. And he's got these weird, like, you've got teeth, and then you've got these like little teeth upper, so it's almost like the whole mouth is like almost like a cactus of teeth with little spines. It's just, it just looks idiotic. And of course they don't even commit to it being an R movie, but they don't even really commit to the any of the biting off of the arm, because that would have been brutal as hell to actually see the teeth sinking in and ripping the flesh and actually getting that kind of horrific point across with some real visceral imagery. And then instead you get the arm off, bitten off clean. There's a CG appearance of blood coming from the arm, and then Georgie falls over, and then Pennywise drags him into the sewer, which in the book basically the kid gets his arm ripped off, but there's some city road crew workers are working with the sewer, working on the drains, and they go over there to see what's wrong with him, and they kind of pull him away from the little part that the water's draining away down to the sewer, and then they see what happens. About that point, he's dead. So, yeah, and from that point on, I just knew that this movie was gonna. I mean, especially once we got introduction to all of the characters. And given how, it wasn't a short movie, but there was no way you were going to get the level of connection and empathy towards the characters without any real ability to, get inside their heads like you do in the books. And, I've seen some reviews that are like, oh, it's because it's a coming of age story. So when the kids are all together, interacting, it's, the best part. And I'm like, well, first off, the dialogue was laughably bad. The kid that played Richie in the book has redeeming qualities, and his attempts at comedy, are kind of show him as being kind of that goofball character, but he's not. I mean, compared to the kid in the film, you would like, if you would hope kids, those are the kids that you would probably want to, flush their head down the toilet, or, or steal their glasses or whatever, or just, or make fun of. It's like, there wasn't redeeming qualities about that kid. It was just cringeworthy with his one-liners. And, I guess kids probably did talk that way, because kids don't know any better. But so the Richie character, was, crap. The character that played Bill was, so-so, just kind of average. They really didn't emphasize the stuttering a lot. I mean, and, it was just kind of thrown in there. I don't know why they just got rid of the stuttering altogether, because it really doesn't even seem to serve a purpose. Because, obviously it was something that, he was made fun of, and that kind of defined his character. But in the movie, it was almost like you didn't even really have to bother. The character of Beverly was just, it was lame. Like I said, way better depiction in the miniseries. She's got like kind of some tomboyish tendencies, but she's not full on, confident tomboy. She's daddy's girl, and, and has a, kind of a bizarre relationship with her father, and that he's abusive, but not not only in a disciplinary way. He has kind of a weird disciplinarian kind of mindset, I guess you could say, but she still tries to be that, kind of prim and proper girl to an extent. And then she kind of, is able to come out of her shell and be a little more tomboyish when she's amongst the other guys. Where this one is just kind of like, I don't know, just like kind of a rebel teen from the get-go, or the rebel kid, and it was just, I don't know, just was kind of lame. Didn't really work very well. Like I said, it didn't really endear you to the character. They had to change up the, Mike Hanlon's character so that he wasn't, because in the book he's on a farm, with his mom and dad, and, works on the farm, and I think I'm pretty sure he's homeschooled. And then in this one, he's basically with kind of a an uncle that isn't too sympathetic towards him and is, trying to get him to become a, part of the meat processing business. So he's got him, trying to, kill a sheep with a bolt pistol or captive bolt pistol, type of thing. And that's just really kind of just in there for just to get a brief glimpse of it, of the character's background. And then after that, it really doesn't even matter that much. And of course they don't allow him to be the narrator and the information gatherer, and the one that's interested in history. So they show, which, in the book, he's, you have a contrasted of this rural black kid that's, kind of, grown up in, as a, manual laborer on the farm, but he's also got a real interest in the dairy town history, and so they kind of temper his character. So he's got these different qualities about him. He's, honest and hardworking, but he does have an intellectual side to him, which, you kind of gloss over a lot with, representative of rural black characters. Typically they lean more towards giving him kind of a, love of music or of some kind of, creative art or something like that, typically. And where Mike becomes a librarian in the story, which is a different twist. And he's kind of the, as far as the having the greatest understanding of what's kind of happening in dairy, as he gets older. And so in this one, that's glossed over, and they just, throw that roll over to Ben Hanscom, who, I think was cast fine. He's kind of an awkward fat kid. I don't know why they had to have him, liking New Kids on the Block. That seemed kind of lame. I mean, they could have, I don't understand that. I mean, I guess that kind of would match with his awkwardness a bit, but, he wasn't, he was a little bit too much of a wimp, I guess. In the book, he's just, his weight is kind of, and his, he kind of emotionally eats, and, I think, and also his mom kind of, is kind of feeds, into it, not to use a pun or anything, it feeds into his kind of his own kind of self-image issues. And so food is kind of a thing, but he still has a kind of a, he's still a young guy. He's got all that interest in, engineering, like I said, in architecture and design and stuff. And he's got a kind of an outgoing kind of, and he's also, when his back's against the wall, he will fight, again, and kind of has that. And where this kid is kind of more the kind of the pudgy weakling, wussy kid, that, whose only redeeming quality is what the traits that were taken from the Mike Hanlon character and given to him. So, cast fine, looks the part and everything, but, not really the same as what it, the one, like I said, again, the casting for the characters in the miniseries was way better. They just all looked a lot more the part, played the parts better. Like I said, that was another reason why I really don't like the fact that they just decided to fast forward to the 1980s to be where that starting point was. I don't think it helped anything. Especially, now you have like a character like I said, Henry Bowers, who's, kind of a representative of that, that one kid that, that the ultimate bully, the quintessential bully, with the abusive, family life that feeds his, need to be, a sadistic need to abuse others and use, and manipulate and use, other people for his own needs. To basically, like, I'd read a comment, somebody had basically said that he looked like, the young Joe Dirt, if you've ever seen that movie with, David Spade. Yeah, he's basically just a mullet, riding around his friend's Trans Am with a mullet, kind of sadistic kid that, the clown, gets to do his dirty business for, and he ends up killing his dad, who's a police officer in the film, which makes absolutely no sense. His dad's basically just some white trash farmer that's down on his luck, and his luck's turned against him, I guess you'd say, and then in favor of the Hanlons, and that's where all of his kind of his anger is set. So he's, basically there just to reinforce Henry's own kind of I don't know if you call it self-loathing or fear, and kind of help to push Henry further and further towards, kind of total psychological breakdown, because he basically goes completely nuts. It's eventually in the story. So he's a police officer, and he really just has, he's not, we basically get a glimpse of him basically making, embarrassing and humiliating his son, and to see his son's kind of, psychological pathology, if you will. But like I said, all of these characters are not developed really. They're just kind of there in a sense to fulfill their kind of, predetermined roles from the book as kind of placeholder roles. So like I said, that's a problem with trying to adapt this to something so short. I mean, the book's over 1,000 pages long. So yeah, and then so as far as the characters go, I mean, they were all kind of. I mean, the kid that played Ed was okay. He was kind of, I think he, as far as being kind of a bit of a hypochondriac and kind of being an over obsessive, that was fine. Again, he's another kid whose mother or a parental figure has kind of developed his whole, kind of mentality and sense of self-worth, because his mom's basically trying to beat into his head that, he's so fragile and everything. And he's really, doesn't really have asthma, because, basically she lost her husband, I believe, due to cancer. So she's got, all she has is her son, and then she's terrified of losing him. So she'll, instead of nurturing him like a mother so that he'll actually love her and, and grow up and appreciate what she's done, she's basically trying to hold him captive using, different forms of emotional manipulation. And we get a tiny little glimpse of that. I don't think we really get much of that in the miniseries or the two-parter, all that much. But yeah, so that character was all right. Not really sure if there's too much, because I already talked about Richie. The Stan Uris character. I mean, he's he's still a Jew in the story, and I guess his dad probably wants him to follow in his footsteps and be a rabbi. But the thing with Stan is, like, he's really like rational. He's really rational and into evidence and science, and and anything and the supernatural seems completely impractical to him, which makes him vulnerable because he refuses to believe it exists. So that character was all right. It was, he fit the part fine. Didn't really stand out. Like, I think I think that his character in this was developed a lot more than in the miniseries, where he was just kind of a tag along in a way. So that character was fine. Like I said, I don't have really anything to say, one way or the other about it. So yeah, as far as the character goes, like I said, Henry Bowers was just kind of a generic bully. You don't really, and his friends were, like I said, Belch and Patrick, and the rest. Patrick ends up being one killed early. He's the psychopath that smothered his baby brother in his crib, or held his face down until he suffocated, and was keeping dead animals or animals barely alive in a fridge, because he was just a psychopath basically. And he was also the one who was given Henry yeah, that guy, the tall lanky black hair kid, was also given Henry a hand job in one scene in the book. Glad they didn't put that in the film. But yeah, it's kind of just glossed over. And so anyway, like I said, those characters were all kind of, there was nothing great about it. There was nothing really endearing or about any of them. They were just kind of generic childhood, characters. It's like Hollywood doesn't really seem to know how to do coming of age stories that well anymore. The 80s were probably a lot of the 80s teen movies and stuff were, even though they may have been a little bit superficial, they, I think, did a better job in a lot of ways. I mean, just go watch Stand By Me. With what, Corey Feldman and the rest, a lot better. Definitely a lot better. If you want to watch an adaptation that deals with that, and far more believable. Or even something like Goonies. I mean, this is I think initially the one of the people that was working on the screenplay before this director took over was trying to combine like the Goonies type of thing with the horror genre. So that might have been interesting. But so yeah, so characters all around pretty much just nothing special about it, nothing memorable about any of them. And like I said, basically what a lot of reviews that have been critical of the film have said that have been pretty much correct, is the film is just a bunch of jump scares, and some set up better than others, but pretty much 99% of the time that Pennywise is on screen is it's comical. It's just laughably bad. For one example, the scene in the library basement where Ben Hanscom starts following the Easter eggs, and we see this kind of weird character that's doesn't have a head and is kind of ambling towards him, and all of a sudden Pennywise's head appears on it, and it's just so CGI driven, and it's like comes running at him, and it's all kind of weird looking, and there's just like multiple scenes like that with Pennywise there just doing, I think that kind of dopey, retarded grin he had on his face was like pretty much Skarsgård's, I guess attempt at acting, because obviously the dialogue was horrible. The dialogue was kind of campy and cheesy to a little bit, in the with Tim Curry, but his acting made it work and made it believable. He looked like a serial killer in a clown costume, basically a psychopath in a clown costume. That was, he had that put you on a little bit on edge with that. But this one, it was just a stupid kind of shit-eating grin on a goofy giant, clown head, and with some bad dialogue and a lot of CGI type attempts at trying to scare the audience by chasing kids off the screen, and even the leper that was at that went after Ed, because Ed, remember, was the hypochondriac, so his fear would be something like a leper, which represents disease and decay and rotting flesh and everything that a hypochondriac would freak out about. It just looks idiotic. It just the design just looks stupid. It would have been better to have had an actual person in, basic press, makeup, latex, kind of wounds and everything, old school horror makeup, acting it out would have been way more effective. But now they just had to try to do something they thought would shock people. And so, yeah, and even the depictions of, the kids floating, for example, as an art, as far as trying to do something new or artistic or spooky. It was just, it was a metaphor. It wasn't supposed to be the kids are literally floating down there. So I thought, well, maybe if they really float, that maybe that'll be a cool image. And it was it might have been kind of cool to see him, just from a visual standpoint, for visual arts, but it didn't really make much difference. So yeah, I'm not going to talk too much more about it. Like I said, basically it was just a really, really cheesy attempts at scares. Really, just the typical kind of modern Hollywood editing. Jump cut between scenes, scare. Trying these jump scares. Kind of the equivalent of sneaking up behind somebody and saying boo, trying to get him to jump. It's a physical reaction, but it's not necessarily built on, a psychological state of, panic or fear. They use that in a lot of films. It'll make you jump just because you didn't expect it, but it doesn't mean, you were actually scared or afraid of it. There was no build up, that really, where that, like I said, the buildup is more important than the scare. At the end, it's like Hitchcock said, the anticipation of the gunshot is far more important than the gunshot itself, because you're building everything up, and that's kind of the release of all that tension. But if you can get the audience, in gripped and with that tension and that, impending, sense of doom, then you're in a good spot. It doesn't happen here. It's just like, oh, here's another scene where another kid's going to have his vision of, what scares them most, and here's another cheesy, attempt at trying to be, creative with, editing and cinematography and everything, and it was just absolute joke. I was just like cringing every time Pennywise came on screen to try to do something scary. I'm like, this, if you show this film to like maybe like an 8 or 9-year-old, yeah, it might scare the shit out of them, but I don't know how this was supposed to scare adults whatsoever. At all. Even if I was, watching this by myself and in like an abandoned warehouse in the middle of nowhere, and on an old screen, and there was wind howling outside and rain and thunder, and I was totally in the kind of this headspace of just primed to be scared by something, then yeah, even then it would totally break the immersion into the film, and I was like, what the hell is this crap? So yeah, I don't know why. It's just like I said, it's just modern audiences are happy to be given scraps, and given the everything is so shitty in terms of quality that a slightly less smelly, less offensive turd appears appealing compared to the rest of the pile of shit. But no, I wouldn't. If you don't spend any money on this, find a way to watch it for free. Have some other sucker spend $1, to rent it from Redbox, or wait till it gets on Netflix or something. But it is bad. There's nothing really redeeming about this movie whatsoever. Not the soundtrack, not any of the dialogue, the characters, the interpretation of King's original, source material. I don't know. It's just embarrassing. I don't know who this guy that directed it, where he came out of the blue from somewhere. I don't know, but it was an embarrassingly bad film. And I had watched the 2-part miniseries, that, like I said, that aired in 1990, right before this, just as a means to compare it to something. And like I said, I've already listened to the audiobook of it before, and I'm about 3/4 of the way through, on a second listen. So I'm pretty much, anticipating, or know what's going to happen. So that's almost like the only way that you can really make sense of it, it beyond any superficial level, is if you know the story, because then you don't need all of this explained to you, and then you've already got empathy built up. And if this film does a halfway decent job of adapting the source material, then you don't need all of that build up again in movie form in order to already have a kind of a soft spot for some of these characters. But all I did was find myself like, I don't give a shit what happens to these kids. I don't care if something horrific happens to them. And Pennywise, like, who gives a shit? I rooted for him to kill him because he was such a crappy villain, such a crappy depiction of the villain, that I just, fine, go ahead, kill him, get rid of him. There's like, just get this damn movie over with. I was expecting, something so, that might, be creepy and maybe have a few kind of memorable parts, as long as the acting was done. But no, Pennywise pretty much just was stunk up the entire film. The kids, I would have rather watched the kids messing, just kind of palling around and, and kind of discovering what's going on and doing their little kind of detective work, than when Pennywise shows up and basically just, shits all over everything, because whoever told the actor that his take on Pennywise was good, was high on something, because it was just embarrassing. Like I said, after watching that interaction and the dialogue and the way he did the voice in the opening scene in the Stuart Storm Drain, I'm like, what the hell is this? This is some of the most god-awful thing I've seen. It's like, where's Tim Curry? Tim Curry still up and around alive? Slap the clown makeup on him and put him in there again, and just have him do the same, Pennywise he did in the original, the original, adaptation, but with some, updated, monster models and graphics and stuff, just a little updated version of that. I mean, they could have just done that way, but yeah, this, I would not watch this movie again, if you paid me to it. It's horrifically bad. Now it's the all-time best-selling, or yeah, best-grossing horror movie, so everyone's gonna, think that it somehow merits, or has earned that, that title through quality. Nah, it's just a lot of hype, and I think a lot of people came in with, believing the hype, and they got suckered and got their money taken, just like most of the other Hollywood movies are doing. So yeah, avoid it. The newest movie adaptation with avoid it at all possible. Don't watch the sequel either, because I imagine it's just going to be just as bad. And if you have to watch it for free some way. Find a way to watch it for free, because it's, I mean, or somebody gives it to you as a present or something. Maybe if you find a used copy in the bargain bin for 99 cents, I wouldn't even recommend buying it. It's absolute garbage. You're just going to waste a couple hours of your life on Drek. So yeah, give this movie a wide berth. The story and the and like I said, the intellectual property deserves a full length miniseries of at least a like a 12 1-hour episode season, or 12 episodes of 1 hour in length type of season, like you'd have on HBO or Showtime minimum, to tackle this story. 50 minutes, like I said, per episode, give and take with the credits. Bang it out, maybe 2 seasons, even if necessary. And that's the only way that you're going to do justice to the story. These little short, condensed versions of something like it. I mean, there's a lot of substance there that you're not tapping into, and there's a possibility for a really great, memorable series if it's done right. But you're not going to get it when they condense it down like this. You're just basically just removing all of the layers of meaning there. And the character development goes out the window. And these are very character based and character driven stories. Very much so, compared to a lot of other kind of horror type stuff, where it's more about the events and the kind of the scares and the what happens to the characters, that due to the monster or whatever, not just their regular lives and their kind of views of the world and growing up and all that sort of thing, which Stephen King just tends to excel at. So yeah, you're not going to get that in a couple movies. It's not going to happen. So I imagine if it's going to be the same Pennywise that we had in the first film, and the second one doing the same stupid voice with the same shit-eating grin, the moronic, attempts at horror and scares. So avoid it. It does not satisfy. It sucks. Take it easy, folks.